This is CBC Here and Now.
More awareness, training and assessment for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. An advocate looks at the successes 10 years on and the work left to be done.
Ours is probably not as bad as some of the other people I spoke to from Newfoundland stuck here. I talked to a crew of guys who've been here for a week. I talked to a bunch of people here 4 or 5 days.
But will they get home for Christmas? We connect with more displaced travelers at the Toronto airport. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Heather Gillis. We begin tonight with new disturbing details about a nursing scandal in Gander. CBC has learned today that a woman who impersonated an RN for months at a long-term care home was criminally convicted in connection with a poisoning death of her young son. The CBC's Terry Roberts has been following this story again today and joins us live from the newsroom with the latest. Terry, what have we learned about the woman at the center of this?
Oh yes, Heather, we've learned a lot more today about Lisa Driscoll. And it raises even more questions about how she was ever able to care for vulnerable nursing home residents in this province. We know she's from Bonavista and she's 43, was known as Lisa Strickland before she was married. She worked as a registered practical nurse in Ontario and she has a criminal record. Driscoll was convicted in January of last year in connection with the death of her young son, Kane. The 4-year-old was found dead in Hamilton, Ontario in September 2017. Cause of death, drug poisoning from an opioid pain medication prescribed to Lisa Driscoll. Lethal doses of it somehow ended up in her son's body. Driscoll was initially charged with manslaughter, but pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of criminal negligence causing death. She was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail, but served 75 days because she had served so much time behind bars prior to her conviction. She was also placed on probation for 3 years. Now, it's a case that was covered by the Hamilton Spectator newspaper, with the judge saying Strickland was in the throes of addiction and made a horrible and tragic choice, knowing that she was risking the life of her young son. The child already had several medical issues, including a heart defect that likely would have required future surgery. He was on a feeding tube at the time of his death, but his health was improving.
So, Terry, how would she have gotten work as a nurse in this province?
Well, we'll get this. It appears Lisa Driscoll, or Lisa Strickland, searched the online database of the province's College of Registered Nurses, and she found a name that was very similar to hers. She used that, plus the person's valid license number, to get a job as an RN with a nursing agency called Staffing Solutions, Inc. Because she never applied for a license here, no red flags were ever raised with the Nurses College. Central Health says Solutions Staffing, Inc. made an error when vetting Driscoll's credentials. So through this agency, she was hired as a travel nurse at the Lakeside Homes long-term care facility in Gander, working more than 24 shifts between August and November, providing care and administering medication to residents. The College of Nurses found out after it received a complaint and notified Central Health a week ago. And of course, Central Health told the public yesterday.
Hey, Terry.
Yes. Yeah, so what is Central Health saying? Well, one of the most important things, Central Health says it's done a thorough review and no one was harmed during Driscoll's time at Lakeside. So whose fault is?
We work with many agencies.
So whose fault is this? Well, Central Health is pointing the finger at Staffing Solutions.
We work with many agencies, and we do value the support that we get from the professionals that come, and we expect when they come that their credentials are vetted and verified and that we are getting what we have asked for.
Okay, Staffing Solutions, Inc., well, they were not available for comment today. Central Health, well, they're apologizing for this embarrassing and dangerous situation.
Terry, have any safeguards been brought in to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, Heather, well, there's now an extra layer of scrutiny for any travel nurse working with Central Health.
We still have nurses who are with us from agencies. We have a number of different agencies that we work with. We can guarantee that anybody who's in the system working with us right now on a contract is, following the correct process and is vetted and verified a second time by us. I can't speak to what will happen with the relationship with the current the current company that we're discussing.
Yeah, so we've made repeated attempts to contact Lisa Driscoll directly and through known family members. And meanwhile, the RCMP has confirmed today that an investigation is underway. Heather?
Terry Roberts reporting. For more on this story, you can visit our website at cbc.ca/NL. In other news now, a major fire in Springdale yesterday forced residents of a nearby retirement home to evacuate. Main Road was impassable for nearly 2 hours as crews battled this fire at Yates Boat Building. The structure, as well as nearby vehicles, sustained extensive damage. According to police, no one was in the building at the time of the fire and no injuries were reported. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Meanwhile, a man is facing arson charges tonight. Police say he was seen pouring gasoline over a house while people were inside. It happened in Deer Lake yesterday morning, just after 7 o'clock. The RCMP say firefighters alerted them. Windows, doors, and siding were all damaged. There was also smoke damage inside the home. The 25-year-old faces a string of charges, including disregard for human life and uttering threats against property. And beginning next week, anyone having a mental health emergency should not go to the Waterford Hospital in St. John's, at least temporarily. Eastern Health says patients in need of a psychiatric assessment should instead go to the emergency room at the St. Clair's Mercy Hospital. The diversion begins next Wednesday on the 28th and will continue until January 17th. The health authority did not provide a reason for the diversion.
Well, the first full official day of winter today was pretty nice out there. Lots of sunshine, a few flurries in the mix, but as we head through to the Christmas weekend, things are going to get stormy. So stormy Christmas Eve, certainly across a good chunk of, well, most of the island, really. We're looking at rain and wind. And then for Labrador, on the cold side of this system, looking at blizzard conditions for most of western Labrador through the day on Christmas Eve. And then as far as Christmas Day is concerned, we're looking at a few flurries in and around the island, maybe even up through parts of Labrador, but the main concern really across most of at least the Newfoundland and Labrador is the wind. We're looking at some pretty gusty winds as we head through the weekend. I'll break the full forecast down for you coming up.
More people from this province say they're stuck in Toronto just days before Christmas. It comes as the country contends with air travel disruptions. One of those people is Michael Worthman. He was flying home from Denmark with Air Canada. He's now in Toronto, and as of now, he's not going any further. Michael, can you describe what you see as you look around the airport in Toronto?
Yeah, so it's bubbling with frustration and sadness, and especially last night, a lot of things came to a head when they canceled a full flight to Newfoundland from Toronto, which we were rebooked on. I think it was probably our third or fourth rebooking.
Yeah, and tell us about your travels so far and where it got disrupted.
Yeah, so ours is probably not as bad as some of the other people I spoke to from Newfoundland stuck here. I talked to a crew of guys who've been here for a week. I talked to a bunch of people here 4 or 5 days. We left 48 hours ago, roughly, or earlier from Denmark, and because of a technical issue on our flight, it was delayed, causing us to miss our original flight home. They tried to rebook us on a flight, got canceled last minute, tried to rebook us on another one to Montreal and back home, got canceled. Word from Air Canada as of now is we don't know anything and you're not going to get home. So last night when they canceled our final rebooked flight, they just said, sorry, go home, go away, no hotel, no money, nowhere to stay, you're stuck in the airport, and we will let you know a course of action in the future, which they have not done so yet.
And Michael, what do you think of that?
Well, I think that's the crux of the story. I mean, of course, everyone is going to say, hey, why, you travel during the holidays, there's always a danger, you're going to get stuck. There's weather in Canada, of course, all that's true. What I think people are frustrated with is that they're not being told what to do, or not being rebooked. They're just being shut down. Air Canada shut down their customer service when there was about 300 or 400 people in the line last night. People were angry. So it's the lack of communication that I think is important to talk about, and sort of like the lack of empathy, we're traveling with an infant, and they weren't giving any information. So everyone was kind of feeling like lost baggage.
What kind of solution would you like to see?
Solution would be for someone, the Air Canada customer service, to reach out and to try to book us on a series of flights to get home.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much for explaining your story to us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Good luck. CBC News has learned that the Stephenville Airport Corporation may be asking the town for continued financial assistance to keep the operation running. 15 months after the sale of the airport to Ottawa businessman Carl Diamond was first announced, the deal still hasn't been finalized. Here and Now's Troy Turner has the details.
Sources say the town council met with the Airport Corporation Board last week to discuss the status of the sale of the airport. At that meeting, the board floated the idea of further financial support from the town while the deal remains pending. According to sources, that could take the form of guaranteeing a loan to fund continued operations at the airport or providing cash grants. This week, the town released its budget for 2023. While there was no financial support on paper, there was continued verbal support for the airport sale.
The acquisition process is currently underway and expected to be finalized any day. Significant investments are anticipated in the coming 4 to 5 years, along with between 2,000 and 3,000 new direct jobs and many secondary jobs in support, engineering, airline sector, tourism, and construction.
Town officials had a meeting scheduled with the health minister this week. Mayor Tom Rose says he's looking to start building up an obstetrics and gynecology unit for the town now to prepare for things to come.
We're going to end up with a lot of young families living in Stephenville because of the jobs created by these sectors, green and aerospace, that are coming in. But these new sectors and young families, the birth rate is really going to go up.
According to the company and the airport board, a 17-year-old insolvency proceeding has been holding up the final sale. In June, Diamond's company said it has, quote, paid the required sums to the trustee involved, and we are currently following the established discharge process. Neither side has given a definitive timeline on when that process will wrap up. The town gave the airport just over $200,000 in 2022. The last payment came this fall. There is no word yet on whether more support is coming. Troy Turner, CBC News, Stephenville.
In other news now, FASD is turning 10. After a decade of educating the public on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, the group says there's still work to be done. Here and Now's Henrika Wilhelm has that story.
Education, training, finding resources. These were and are the goals of the FASD organization in this province.
The need came from, a recognition that FASD is more common than the general public understands it to be, and that not only is it common, it is complex.
Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is a result of a fetus's exposure to alcohol during pregnancy. Alcohol consumption can negatively impact brain development. The effects differ depending on the stage of the pregnancy.
FASD is a spectrum disorder, similar to autism spectrum disorder in that sense that, you can't sort of expect that people will present in the exact same way.
It's estimated that the prevalence of FASD is at about 4% of the general population. That's more than 21,000 people in the province, making it more common than autism. Strides have been made in the last decade.
And we see that through a number of different sort of measures. In terms of general awareness, service providers and professional awareness, and also in terms of government awareness.
FASD was mentioned in the Alcohol Action Plan introduced by the provincial government in July.
Knowing that Newfoundland and Labrador has the highest rate of heavy alcohol consumption in the country, the highest rate of impaired driving in the country, this was one of the 13 action items identified.
But assessment options still lag behind. Only one diagnostic team exists provincially in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and that's only for those 8 to 18-year-old.
In the northern regions of the province, it's seen as particularly important. The rates of alcohol consumption are higher within certain populations in the province.
Dunbar Windsor says the organization will spend the next 10 years further improving FASD diagnosis, prevention and resources and debunking persisting stereotypes. Henrike Wilhelm, CBC News, St. John's.
Moving on now, there's an increase in gas prices to tell you about tonight. The cost went up nearly 4 cents a litre overnight. The maximum price on the Avalon Peninsula is now just over $1.55 per litre. All other fuels are down between half a cent and 6.2 cents a litre. A former Labrador City resident has fulfilled an artistic dream, photographing out-of-season mummers. And I'm talking about mummers in the summer. Adam Kosh is releasing his photo series just in time for the holidays.
So I always had this thought in my head that I wanted to photograph mummers. And, I grew up with mummers visiting the home, and it always was just such a fun experience for me. And, since becoming a photographer here in Toronto, I always wanted to kind of connect the two worlds at some point. And I was just super thrilled, find a bunch of people and make this dream shoot come together. So getting to meet these people and actually hear their stories was really great. And for me, first of all, I'll start with James Murphy, who was this cute young girl. And I've never seen such a young kid who was so passionate about mummering. This kid loves it so much that she dresses up for it. And, in times when it's not even necessary, she just really lives for it. And I just thought that was so cute in such a, a young age. I think a beautiful thing about mummering is that it allows you to kind of break down some walls and allow yourself to be a little foolish because, you got a costume on and everyone's doing the same. So it just kind of brings this levity and this kind of goofiness, into the air. I think that's the beautiful thing about mummering is that while there is a cohesiveness to it, everybody brings their own flavor. And I was lucky that there was a nice mix. And it's a grandmother with her 3 grandkids. And so she was really excited. And while they don't live in Newfoundland full time, they still embrace the tradition, and Beverly really wanted to incorporate them into it. So it was really fun to see, a grandmother and her grandkids come together and celebrate it in a photo shoot. And I know, and they've certainly done it before. And I know that this photo shoot will only instill more excitement for the future. Yeah, you can go onto my website at adamkoshphotography.com. There's a full series of the images just for the images to see. And as well as you can go onto my blog that's connected through my website that got a write-up and some quotes and stuff from all the different mummers I photographed. I did bring just a bottle of Lamb's rum, thinking if anybody needed some Woolly to kind of, calm the nerves. I'd have that accessible for them, but no one really had to crack into it because I think they were all pretty willing when they showed up. But I certainly had that, and we had one at the end of the shoot to celebrate.
Check this out. Crowds are flocking to a neighborhood in Prince Edward Island to see a 40-foot tall Santa. It towers over this house in Prince County, and he's not just an attraction, he's inspiring acts of kindness. Stay with us. Ashley's weather is ahead.
It's certainly nice to see the sun again across a good portion of the island today. We did see a few flurries in the mix, but overall fairly quiet, and will be quiet over the next at least day or so. So if you do have some shopping to get done, you brave people, on Friday, it's looking like it'll be pretty nice, because as we head towards the weekend, things are going to get stormy. So right now we're sitting under a ridge of high pressure. We've got some cool air in play, but nothing like what's happening over most of Canada, especially towards central and western portions of Canada. We've got lots of Arctic air and a big system, in fact, spanning about 3,000 kilometers and potentially affecting 25 million people as we head through the weekend. So this area of low pressure combined with this Arctic air and some milder air is creating a weather bomb, and that just means that the system, the area of low pressure, is deepening about 24 millibars of pressure in 24 hours. So this will likely bring some blizzard conditions to parts of Ontario. Right now, sitting under a ridge of high pressure for most of Atlantic Canada, some of this cooler air in play as well, which is why temperatures, which have been sitting above zero, are sitting below zero. And as we head through the night tonight, some cold air really moving in across Labrador, particularly Lab West. Temperatures dipping into the minus 20s. That will stick around for the most part as we head through the day, but then that system will move in. It's actually going to bring some pretty mild air across the island, where we're going to see temperatures well above where we should be sitting this year, this time of year rather. In fact, some places could be seeing 10, 11 degrees through the day on Saturday, particularly for eastern and southern areas of the island. Now, taking a look at what we've got on the go right now, just looking at some flurries as we head through the overnight tonight. Nothing super impressive, but still a little bit unsettled, certainly in that onshore flow for the west coast. Otherwise, just partly to mostly cloudy skies. The story, and again, a few flurries in the mix, maybe through parts of central. But the temperatures are going to be cold. That is the coolest temperatures up across Labrador and Lab West, minus 22 overnight tonight. Relatively light winds, but you'll still have a bit of a wind chill in the air. And then the rest of Labrador sitting somewhere between minus 10 to minus 19. Minus single digits for the most part across the island. However, low-lying areas, especially through central, will dip into the minus double digits, minus 12 tonight in Grand Falls, Windsor. Taking a look at the forecast for tomorrow, a quiet day as far as that's concerned. A little bit more sunshine again for central and parts of the west coast, and potentially some flurry activity for the eastern half of the island. Likely more on the way of cloudy skies, but you'll likely still see a few peaks of sun in the mix as well. Temperatures below zero for the most part, and or just around the 0 degree mark. Up across Labrador, still looking at your temperatures in the minus single digits, minus 14 in Lab City, but this will certainly be the calm before the storm, because as we see this system start to get its act together tonight across Ontario, bringing rain, snow. If you do have travel plans, we're already starting to see some cancellations, so this will be a mess, especially through the weekend. That'll head towards the Maritime provinces as we get through the day on Friday in the way of wind and rain for the most part, and then it'll head towards Newfoundland and Labrador. This will likely start as a wintry mix, so snow, freezing rain, ice, pellets fairly quickly up across Labrador. This will be a wind and snow event, potentially even some blizzard, well, likely some blizzard conditions. Wouldn't be surprised to see those blizzard warnings either. But definitely wind warnings, all from Parsons Pond, Hawke's Bay, all the way down through to the Wreck House area, where we could be seeing those winds gusting as high as 140 kilometers per hour, even 150 kilometers per hour. And these winds will really ramp up through the day on Saturday, combined with that rainfall through the afternoon. So areas certainly that are prone to southeasterlies will see these wind gusts as well. Corner Brook to Bay St. George, you're looking at those winds gusting as high as 140 kilometers per hour, and then somewhere between 100 and 110 for the rest of the west coast. So certainly going to be a windy day on Christmas Eve, and good thing is it'll come in the form of rain. We'll break down how much on the way when I come back.
Believe my eyes when I saw it for sale here in Calgary.
What was for sale was a bright red vintage fire truck. We'll tell you the story behind it, including the Newfoundland connection. That's next.
Hi there, my name is Alex Kennedy. I'm a digital reporter with the web team for CBC Newfoundland and Labrador here in St. John's. I'm just about to record some audio, but before I do, I just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, and a very prosperous New Year. Thanks for being with us in 2022, and here's to 2023.
A man who grew up in Harbour Grace has been reunited with a rare but important fire truck in Calgary. Ed Oak's dad volunteered with the Harbour Grace Fire Brigade for more than 50 years. His dad loved the bright red 1960 Mercury truck, so it had a lot of sentimental value to Oak. And he's joining us now to tell us more about how he restored the old fire truck to its former glory. Thanks for joining us, Ed.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
I'm well. Ed, first tell us a little bit about your first memories of this truck.
Well, when I was a kid, I guess you'd call me a brat around the fire hall. My dad used to spend time around the fire hall with his friends and fellow department members, and I used to tag along with him every chance I could. I loved going to the fire hall as a young kid. And this truck was the one that he liked to take out for test drives. The firemen on Sundays would typically take the trucks out, test drive, and make sure everything was working okay, do some basic maintenance. And I used to get to go with him in the cab of this truck. It was his favorite amongst the trucks they had. He really liked driving it. And of course, as a kid, I used to love hopping in it with him and going for a spin around town. It was pretty cool for a kid.
What makes it so special to you?
Well, just the fact that I think we were able to do that together.
And I understand it's rare. What can you tell us about the truck?
Yeah, so in 1959, Ford started producing factory 4x4 trucks in 1959. And in 1960, they only made 1,800 of these trucks in Canada. Actually, Ford trucks in Canada, they made Mercuries and they sold them in Canada. They were only sold in Canada. The Mercuries weren't sold in the US. So this was a factory Mercury truck produced in Oakville, Ontario, with factory 4x4, a 3/4 ton truck. And there's only 1,800 trucks made, and only a very small percentage of them were 3/4 tons, and only a very small percentage of those had the factory 4x4. So we don't know exactly the number of the factory 4x4s in a 3/4 ton, but it's a very small number. We know that for sure.
And I understand it was in service in Harbour Grace for about 30 years. Then what happened? Tell us the story of the truck.
Yeah, so in 1990, the brigade was in the process of wanting to buy a new truck. So they decided to sell this truck. It was 30 years old at that point, and they needed room in the fire hall also for the new truck that they were trying to buy. So the town decided to sell it at auction. And from what I've been told from a couple of the current members, it sold at auction for about $3,500. And my dad and I, at the time, we talked about it. We thought, geez, it'd be nice to be able to buy this old truck. We just didn't have anywhere to put it. My dad really didn't have the money to buy it. I was in university at the time. It didn't make sense for me. So unfortunately, we saw it go at auction. The story that we heard at the time was that it went to a collector in the US, but we've since found out that it ended up in New Brunswick. And an individual named Scott Hadley here in Calgary, he saw it for sale in New Brunswick in 2019 and bought it and brought it to Calgary. And then I subsequently bought it from Scott in 2020.
Wow. So tell me about that restoration process now.
Yeah, so I bought it in 2020. Couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it for sale here in Calgary in 2020. Quite a shock. So Mike and I started the restoration in January of this year, and it's taken us about 10 months, almost a full year, to get it to full restoration stage. And the process itself, was labor intensive. A lot of the parts for this generation of pickup trucks are relatively easy to get. There's a number of suppliers that you can get the parts for, original parts for. But there were a couple of pieces and parts that we really struggled trying to find, but in the end, thankfully, we were able to find them and get it inspected and get it on the road. And I've been lucky enough now the last week or two to be able to take it for a drive.
And what's going to happen with the truck now? What will you do with it?
Actually, keeping it down. We have a small cabin down in BC. We live in Calgary, but we have a small cabin down in BC, and I'm actually going to keep it down there and there, and just get to drive it around. And actually, next week they're having their Santa Claus parade down there next week. So their Santa Claus parade is going to see a 1960 Mercury M250 fire truck in their Santa Claus parade next week. And some of the community members don't know that yet, but they're going to see it next week.
Excellent. And finally, Ed, what do you think your dad would think of the restoration job?
I think he would have been very interested in the restoration process for sure. I think he would have been fascinated by it. Actually, he loved history. He was involved in a lot of the history in Harbour Grace, and I think he would have really found the process interesting. If he was still with us today, he'd want to get to Calgary and get a chance to drive in that truck, I'm sure. But if there's any chance that he's watching, he's got a pretty big grin on his face, I suspect.
Okay, well, Ed Oak, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story.
You're welcome. Have a good Christmas.
As we have one turbine and one electrolyzer operating, we'll be making hydrogen.
The key player in the windmill project proposed for the Port-au-Port Peninsula sits down with CBC News to talk about his plan, one that's caused tension and excitement on the west coast of the island. Welcome back to the show. He's the billionaire businessman who wants to build a massive wind and hydrogen farm on Newfoundland's west coast. The first phase of John Risley's project would see 164 wind turbines on the Port-au-Port Peninsula in an area the size of St. John's. Radio Canada's Patrick Butler sat down with John Risley and brings us this feature interview.
Well, Mr. Risley, first of all, I'd like to get an update on cost and timeline for your project.
Cost, it's really too early to move off of the budget that we've been talking about, which is $12 billion US. And we're in a variety of engineering studies now, which by September of next year will allow us to be much more accurate in respect of what costs are. We don't expect a significant deviation from that number. And timeline, frankly, is as quickly as possible.
I was at a Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association conference not long ago. 2025 was the date for first exporting. Is that still the case?
Yeah, and this is a unique project because most projects of this type or size, if you like, don't tend to go into production until the project is finished. Whereas as soon as we have one turbine and one electrolyzer operating, we'll be making hydrogen. So when we say 2025, that's sort of first hydrogen, but the project itself won't be complete for a couple of years after that.
In the initial submissions that you made to government, it was talking about 164 turbines. When you look at the latest land nominations map, it seems to have changed a little bit from that original map from that early submission. Is it still 164 turbines you're hoping to put in the
that will change. We'll have to inevitably move some turbines as a consequence of the environmental studies we're doing. We may be able to add what we move or lose in one spot, we may be able to add another. So we do expect some change. What the exact number will be at the end, I can't tell you.
I remember watching a video from an early presentation you gave in Cape St. George, I believe, where you said to residents there, I'm going to be reasonable. If you make a reasonable request, we'll have a reasonable answer. How far does that go? What does that mean, really?
Yeah, it means we're listening. We're in the process of signing agreements with all the local First Nations communities, and they've got a variety of wish lists in terms of how they would like to see their local benefits agreements discharged, if you like, and I think we're showing a lot of collaboration and cooperation on that front. We announced recently, as you'll be perhaps aware, a community benefits program where we will take account of the fact that it's going to be some period of time before taxes start to generate as a consequence of the project being finished. And so here's some funding in lieu of taxes during the construction period. We're not going to tell you how to spend it, but we'd like to see it go into infrastructure of the community from which everybody will benefit. So we're trying to do what we would consider to be the right thing and listen to people.
On the community partnerships, there has been some criticism when you compare this project to others in other parts of the country in terms of the degree of partnership with communities, in terms of the benefits derived from the project. There's this $10 million fund that you mentioned, but beyond the initial 3 years of construction, not a whole lot of details. I mean, is that a problem, do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say there isn't a fair amount of detail. What we've said to people is one of the early arguments we heard from the communities where the wind turbines are going to be is, look, this is great for Stephenville. They get a big hydrogen plant and they get a lot of tax dollars. What are we getting? And we thought that was a very reasonable argument. So we said, look, you're not a taxing authority in your own right. But we will pay you exactly what we're paying the community of Stephenville. And you need to organize yourself into a group that is capable of receiving this money and spending it on behalf of the whole community. So I think that's pretty granular evidence, if you like, of our willingness to make sure everybody understands that this is a project that will benefit everybody in the communities in which we're going to be operating.
Outside of those, locals in the communities, we've been speaking to some experts in hydrogen, in wind energy, who've said that the project, in the information that they have, it seems like it's going to be very expensive to produce hydrogen, and they've called into question the viability of that, of the project as a whole, really. What do you say to them?
Well, I don't. I don't know what it is they're arguing.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. For instance, I spoke to one expert with the Hydrogen Science Coalition who said that, you know, when you take wind energy, make it into hydrogen, make it into ammonia, put it on a boat, transport it to Europe, and then turn it back into electricity, you're losing, by his calculations, 80 to 90% of the energy.
That's a great argument, and I would agree with his assessment. It's not quite 80 or 90%, but it's a very significant
amount.
Sure. No, absolutely, and that's why that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
What is going to happen is we are taking, we are going to be taking electron molecules, electricity, which can be produced in an area that is globally competitive, and we are going to ship it to Europe. And the mechanism by which we do that is we convert it into hydrogen, because we can't ship the electricity, right? So hydrogen is the conveyor, if you like. Now, are we going to take that hydrogen, convert it into ammonia, convert it back to hydrogen, and then use it as electricity? No, that's nuts. You don't do that. You convert it into hydrogen to ammonia, and then you use it as green ammonia, right? And the loss there, the energy loss there, is about 45%. So if you think about this for a moment, to speak to your viability question, we think we can produce electricity for, let's call it, 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt hour, right? Electricity in Europe at the moment is 20 or 25 cents a kilowatt hour. Do the math, right? So we can lose 45% efficiency and still be far ahead of the game, right?
Final decision on this project hasn't yet been made. Can you know when it will be?
We're not going to have the detail on that construction budget until September, so we're not able to conclude the financing package till then. And so what we call final investment decision will be September, October of next year.
Do you think you can regain trust on the West Coast with those that you've lost it with?
Look, we're doing everything we can to engage with the community. We've got a community office open at the airport. We've got community representatives that go out to the communities on a weekly basis. We're generating a weekly community correspondence. We're posting on social media. We're taking people's questions. People can come into the office anytime at all. If people ask us to go out to community meetings, we'll be there in a heartbeat. So we're trying hard to do everything we possibly can to be open and transparent and to listen to people. Does that mean that we're satisfying everybody? No, it doesn't, but I'm not sure that we're going to ever be able to do that. I think our job is to be doing exactly what we are doing and to continue to do that right throughout the entire project.
John Risley, thank you.
Not at all.
Canada's latest inflation numbers are out, and the cost of food keeps going up. Canadians are paying 11% more compared to a year ago. Meanwhile, profits at grocery chains are growing. The federal NDP claims corporate greed is driving up food prices and that big grocery should be taxed on their profits to help people cope with inflation. In a year-end interview, CBC News chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton put that idea to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Grocery bills are expected to rise for a family of 4 by $1,000 next year. Your government has implemented a windfall tax on sectors like banking and insurance sectors. What about grocery stores, though, that continue to make a profit at a time when, for a lot of Canadians, that doesn't seem right?
The last thing we want to do is put on a tax that people then just pass along to the consumers. So we have to be careful about what we're doing. We're studying. I know there's been a lot of studies on what's happening with food prices, and we're looking at trying to help people. That's what we've tried to do every step of the way. But I don't think that the simplistic solution, as satisfying as it might sound, is necessarily the right approach here.
You can hear more of what the Prime Minister has to say on healthcare, inflation, and more. Rosemary Barton's year-end interview with Justin Trudeau airs this Sunday. That's Christmas Day at noon Island time and a half hour earlier in most parts of Labrador. And as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of people stranded at Pearson International Airport in Toronto tonight. Across the country, there are delays caused by snow, and in the U.S. as well, where there are connecting flights. Pearson is Canada's biggest airport, and that place is getting ready for a hectic weekend.
We're still seeing some ripple effect here at Pearson from what the weather event that was in Vancouver. So we expect that could last through the weekend.
Air travelers are being told to make sure they have all they need in their carry-on bags, items such as medication and diapers. And a massive storm is blanketing a large part of the United States. Snow and high winds are making travel difficult in many states. An estimated 112 million Americans will be on the move over the holidays. Thousands of flights have already been canceled. U.S. forecasters say this Christmas could be one of the coldest in decades in some places. Welcome back. Earlier in the show, you saw an impressive 40-foot Santa who's towering over a neighborhood on Prince Edward Island. Julia Ramsey says Santa is so big and so bright, he lights up her street. Not only has he inspired Christmas spirit, he's also generating a lot of joy and a lot of generosity.
So the first time he was inflated, I actually wasn't home. I was away with my mother, and on our way home we could see this red glow illuminating my property before we even got onto my road. So by the time we got onto my road, I realized that it was my property that it was coming from, and I never anticipated the size that he was going to be at all. The purpose of ordering was just to try and bring a little bit more Christmas spirit to the area. It gained a lot more popularity than I ever expected, having people from all across the island come to see it. But he was special ordered from the North Pole, and he's created a lot of joy, so that's the main thing. There's some evenings I'll be inside just kind of watching from the window, and there will be traffic lined up on both sides of the road, and the driveway will be full of vehicles. You know, we decided to turn it into something to be a good cause. So we actually partnered with the West Prince Caring Cupboard and the West Prince Christmas Hampers Group to do a little bit of a toy blitz and accept monetary donations as well as toys. So far we've raised over $1,200. We've probably gotten between like 50 and 60 toys, and then like multiple bags of groceries for the Caring Cupboard.
Well, the weather over the last couple of weeks hasn't been very busy. We've been in a pattern where we're just seeing RDF for the most part, not a whole lot of storms. But of course, as we head towards the Christmas season and, lots of people traveling, we're looking at a pretty big storm moving in. So let's just time that out one more time. As we head through the overnight on Friday into Saturday, we'll start to see that snow develop up across Labrador, combined with some pretty strong winds. And then as far as the island is concerned, in the morning, we'll start as some snow, mainly rain though for eastern areas of the island, but it'll likely be snow or even ice pellets. And we're looking at that potential for ice pellets pretty much anywhere, or freezing rain anywhere where you're seeing that pink. Now the good news is this doesn't last very long. Temperatures climbing fairly quickly, and that will change over to rain. However, blizzard conditions definitely possible up across parts of the Big Land as that snow continues for a good chunk of Saturday. Now this will move through fairly quickly, but take a look at those temperatures, 7 to 11 degrees across most of the island. And then Northern Peninsula, you're going to stay around 1 or 2 degrees, but this will primarily be a snow event for you, but then change over to potentially some ice pellets and then ending as drizzle, it looks like, through the afternoon. Otherwise, temperatures fairly mild up across Labrador, relatively speaking, as to where we should be sitting this time of year. But you are looking at those blizzard conditions and winds gusting as high as 100 kilometers per hour. So here's a look at the freezing rain potential. Pockets of higher amounts, but we could be talking about 2 to as much as 10 millimeters of freezing rain. But again, that will change over to rain as we head into the afternoon hours on Saturday. Now, as far as those winds go, especially up across Labrador, we're talking about those winds gusting between 80 to 100 kilometers per hour. So expect near zero visibility through a good chunk of the day on Saturday, and eventually those winds will ease as we get into Sunday. Now, snowfall amounts, still early predictions, but at this point we could be talking about 20 to 30 centimeters in most cases for Lab West. So you combine that with those strong winds, definitely not going to be a very nice day for sure on Saturday. Taking a look at your Sunday forecast, generally pretty nice, maybe even a few peaks of sun. We're going to stay above zero for the eastern half of the island, well, most of the island really, but chance of showers certainly possible, but we could see a few flurries in the mix for the west coast through the day. And then your long range forecast looking above zero for the most part right as we get into Tuesday. A chance of a few flurries though making their way back into the forecast, certainly Monday and into Tuesday. And then for central Newfoundland, some sunshine by the time we get into your Christmas, but even into Monday, Tuesday looks nice at this point. Temperatures dipping below zero, and then well below zero for western Newfoundland with that chance of flurries in the mix. Now, as far as Labrador goes, stormy Saturday, but then the rest of the week looking pretty nice, but that big dip in temperatures back down where we should be sitting this time of year. In fact, about minus 20 by the time we get into Tuesday for western Labrador. Just before I leave you tonight, Take a look at this great shot. This is Ned's Pond on the winter solstice yesterday. Frank Gale shared that great shot with us. If you have any weather photos, send them to Facebook, Twitter, or email them to nophotos@cbc.ca.
And how nice is that? Very serene. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That is our show. Please join us again tomorrow on Tibbs Eve, the eve of Christmas Eve. Good night. Take care.